My name is Margaret, and I'm 63 years old. On Thanksgiving, my own son stood up in front of 20 guests and told me to pay rent or find somewhere cheaper to live. He had no idea the penthouse he was so proud of was mine. The car in his garage was mine. The credit card his wife swiped all over Austin, that was mine too. Every single thing, and I sat there in my apron and said nothing. That night, I finally broke my silence, and it nearly destroyed him. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments. And please, stay with me until the end. The turkey came out of the oven at 4:15, the way it always did, the way I'd timed it for 30 years. I'd been on my feet since 6 that morning in my son Ethan's kitchen, peeling, basting, rolling out pie crust on a marble island that cost more than the first car his father and I ever owned. Pecan pie, cornbread dressing, the candied sweet potatoes Ethan had loved since he was 4 years old and would eat with his fingers until I smacked his hand. 20 people filled the great room of that downtown Austin penthouse. Ethan's cousins, his college buddies, his wife, Brielle's marketing crowd, a couple of neighbors who'd wandered in for the open bar. The windows ran floor to ceiling, the whole skyline lit up gold behind them. Somebody had put on a playlist. Somebody else was 3 glasses deep into a bottle of wine I'd stocked the bar with myself. I moved between the kitchen and the table, refilling glasses, clearing plates nobody offered to carry. My apron had a gravy stain on it. My hair was pulled back in the same plain twist I'd worn since I was 40. Maggie, Hans, sit down already, Brielle's friend Whitney said, flashing me that smile people give the help when they want to feel generous. You've been running circles all day. Take a load off. I'm fine, I said. You all enjoy. From my spot by the counter, I could see the whole room, and I could see my son at the head of the table like he was born to it. 32 years old, white button down, sleeves rolled, the watch Brielle gave him last Christmas catching the light. He was telling his cousin Drew about North Ledger, the fintech startup where he ran product. This quarter's been straight up insane, man, Ethan was saying, swirling his glass. We closed a round, my equity's looking real nice, and honestly, PM money in this town is no joke. Pays for the place, the car, all of it. Brielle leaned into him, 30 years old, in a dress that cost more than my monthly grocery budget for a year, her nails catching the lights, same as the watch. And it still barely covers Austin, she said, just loud enough. I swear, this city's gotten so bougie. Rent, the lifestyle, nothing's free. Y'all, my uncle's old line, almost word for word. Heads nodded around the table. Somebody's husband cleared his throat and said $2,000 a month wouldn't get you a closet downtown anymore. Exactly, Ethan said, sitting up. That's why I always tell people, you gotta grind. Nobody hands you a thing in this town. I kept slicing turkey. Nobody looked at me. Nobody saw my knuckles go white around the handle of the carving knife. Then my son set down his glass with a soft, deliberate click, and he looked right at me. Hey, Mom. His voice cut clean through the music, and the room went quiet the way a room does when everyone can feel something coming. Since we're on the subject of the place, 20 faces turned toward me. I've been thinking, he said, easy as anything, like he was talking about the weather. If you're going to keep crashing here with us, it's only fair you chip in on rent. Like any grown adult sharing a space, you know. He glanced around the table, fishing for backup. We're all adults here. And look, I get it. The widow's pension only stretches so far. Maybe it'd be better for you to find a place that fits your budget. Brielle took a slow sip of wine. It's nothing personal, Maggie. Everybody's got to pull their own weight these days, even family. A pause, especially family. We should be real with each other. I looked around that table for one person, just one. Whitney suddenly found something fascinating in her napkin. Drew coughed and stared at his plate. A man I'd never met before that afternoon gave a little nod, like fair enough. Ethan's Aunt Carol actually murmured, well, she's got a point. At our age, you do have to stay independent. Nobody said, are you out of your mind, talking to your mother like that? Nobody said, it's Thanksgiving, man. Nobody said a word in my defense. The silence got so thick I could hear the clock ticking over the stove. And in that silence, I felt 30 years of sleepless nights, of counting pennies, of building something out of nothing so this boy could have a life. I felt all of it just evaporate into the air conditioning. I set the carving knife down on the counter. I folded my napkin. I laid it next to a plate I hadn't touched. I stood up and my knees popped and I made myself smile. "Thank you all for coming," I said, and my voice came out so calm it surprised even me. "This is probably the last Thanksgiving I'll spend at this table." Ethan blinked. "Mom, come on, don't be dramatic. We're just trying to be real with you here." "You're right, Ethan," I said, and I looked him dead in the eye. "It's time to be real." I turned and walked down the hall to the guest room that had been mine for the last 2 years. Behind me, I heard chairs scraping, an uncomfortable laugh, somebody trying to patch the moment over with, "So, who's ready for pie?" I shut the bedroom door. The latch barely made a sound, but in my head it landed like the last page of a book closing. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the two photographs on the nightstand. The first one was Wesley and me, 1991, the day we wired our first building. He's grinning in the picture, 28 years old, still in his climbing gear with the gaff hooks on his boots, because back then my husband was a lineman, up on the poles in the Texas heat, restringing power after every storm that rolled through the hill country. I'm next to him in a $5 sundress, holding a clipboard, because even then I was the one who kept the numbers. People at that table thought they knew our story. They knew the version Ethan told. Let me tell you the one nobody knew. Wesley and I met in 1985 in a little town outside San Antonio. I was 24, cleaning houses and doing the books for anybody who'd pay me $10 to do it. He was 22, up a pole in a thunderstorm, the dumbest, bravest, most stubborn man I ever met. We married 6 months later. The honeymoon was a weekend in Galveston and a sunburn we both regretted. When Ethan came along, we were in a 400 square foot place in East Austin, the kind of apartment where you could touch both walls if you stretched. Wesley worked storm season 12, 16 to 6 hours a day. I did bookkeeping from a card table with the baby asleep in a laundry basket beside me. Every dollar we didn't spend went into a coffee can on top of the fridge. It took us 9 years to scrape together the down payment on a little duplex. We fixed it up ourselves. Wesley rewired the whole thing with his own 2 hands. I painted every wall. Ethan handed us tools when he was 5 and thought he was the most important man alive. We rented out one half. That rent went into the can. The can bought another property. Wesley had a gift. He could look at a building everybody else called a teardown and see exactly what it could become. I had a different gift. I could make a dollar do the work of 3. In 2003, a lawyer told us we needed a company to hold it all. Wesley thought about the live oaks that grew tough and slow all over the hill country, the ones you couldn't kill with a drought or a freeze. "Ironwood," he said. "We'll call it Ironwood." We came up through the '08 crash buying when everyone else was running for the doors. By the time the tech money started flooding into Austin, Ironwood wasn't just buildings anymore. We were backing the startups too, quiet checks, no name on the door. By 2019, we held pieces of more companies than I could count on both hands. And then one Tuesday that November, Wesley put a hand to his chest in our office while he was reading over a deal. And he said, "Mags." And that was the last word my husband ever spoke to me. Massive coronary. He didn't suffer, the doctor said, like that was supposed to fix anything. So no, I am not a widow scraping by on a pension. That night, I didn't go to a mansion. I don't own one, never wanted one. I had a car waiting downstairs, and it took me across town to an ordinary 800 square foot apartment in a quiet building with no doorman and no view. My real home. The place I came to when I needed to stop being anybody's poor old mother and just be Margaret Calloway again. I opened my laptop and logged into the Ironwood system. I clicked the folder labeled with my son's name. There it all was, in black and white. The penthouse, owned by an Ironwood entity leased to Ethan at a friends and family rate he never once questioned. The electric SUV in his garage, a corporate lease. His name listed as authorized driver, temporary. The black North Ledger credit card Brielle, treated like it was printed just for her, an authorized card on my personal account. And North Ledger itself, the startup my son bragged about, the equity he thought made him a self-made man, Ironwood had led the seed round. We'd kept that company breathing through 2 near-death quarters. Every single thing he was so proud of, I had paid for in silence, and I told myself it was love. I sat there a long time. Outside, somebody's Thanksgiving fireworks lit up the window, and for the first time in 2 years, I let myself ask the question I'd been hiding from. Why did I do it? Why did I let him believe the lie? Because I wanted him to feel like he'd earned it. Because I thought if I gave him everything, gratitude would just grow there on its own. I was wrong. Love that sets no limits isn't love at all. It's fear dressed up to look like generosity. And it had raised a man who could look his own mother in the eye and tell her to find somewhere cheaper to live. I picked up the phone. Theo, it's Maggie. Theo Bennett had been Wesley's friend for 20 years. And after my husband died, he became the public face of Ironwood, the CEO whose name was on the press releases, while I ran everything from a back office nobody photographed. He picked up on the second ring, 11 o'clock on Thanksgiving night. Maggie, everything okay? I need you and Diane in the office first thing tomorrow, I said. Bring everything we've got on Ethan. The lease, the vehicle authorization, the card, the cap table, all of it. A long pause. Mags. He only called me that when he was worried. You sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. The next morning, Ironwood's offices were dead quiet the day after the holiday. I sat at the long table in the boardroom with Theo on one side and Diane Caldwell, our attorney, on the other. Diane was 54, sharp as a tack, the kind of lawyer who reads you the worst case scenario before she says good morning. She had 3 folders lined up in front of her like a surgeon's tools. Walk me through it, I said. 3 assets, Diane said. The residence, the vehicle, the card. Let's take them one at a time. She slid the first folder over. The Penthouse lease renews January 31st. You're well within your rights not to renew. 30 days written notice, which we can send today. When the notice comes from a property management company instead of from his mother, trust me, it lands different. What if he digs and finds out it's Ironwood? Shareholders aren't public. He'd have to pull the entity records and chase the LP structure, and that takes weeks. Thin smile. By the time he gets there, the 30 days are gone. The SUV? Cleaner. It's a corporate lease. He's a temporary authorized driver. We revoke it and request return within 48 hours. He doesn't comply. We send a crew with the spare key and the card. 1 phone call. It's an authorized card on your account. We cancel it. It dies the same afternoon. I looked at the 3 folders, 3 blows, landing in 3 days. House, car, money. Theo leaned forward, his voice low. We could take card first, then the car, give him time to. No, I said. Staggering it would be cruel. That's cutting off 1 finger a day instead of pulling the bandage off all at once. He needs to feel the whole weight, all of it, so he understands the size of what he did. Diane's eyebrows went up half an inch, the closest thing to respect that woman ever showed. You're tougher than people give you credit for. I'm not tough, I said. I'm a mother who went blind for 3 years and finally decided to open her eyes. She gathered the folders, then paused on the last one, and her tone shifted. Maggie, there's also the matter of Wesley's provision, the condition in the will. If we start moving assets around, at some point that's going to become relevant. Not yet, I said. Too fast, maybe. We deal with the lease, the car, and the card. That's all. The rest waits. Diane held my eyes for a second, then nodded and let it go. We spent 2 hours drafting the non-renewal notice, Ironwood Capital, in its capacity as lessor of the property at. Hereby notifies you that the lease expiring January 31 will not be renewed. You have until that date to vacate. Signed Theo Bennett, Chief Executive Officer. The vehicle recall letter, temporary authorization for use of the vehicle, is hereby revoked. Return within 48 hours to our facility. The card took 1 call. Diane dialed the bank on speaker. Thank you for calling. This is Card Services. My name's Danielle. How can I help you? Good morning, Diane said. I'm calling on behalf of Margaret Calloway, primary account holder. We need to cancel an authorized card. Sure thing. Can I get the name on the authorized card? Ethan Calloway. A pause, the tap of a keyboard. Okay, I've got it pulled up. Immediate cancellation or scheduled. Diane looked at me. I nodded. Immediate. You got it. That card'll be dead in the system within the hour. Anything else for you today? Yes, actually, I said, leaning toward the phone. I'd like a full statement of charges on that card, last 12 months, emailed over when you get a chance. Can do, Mrs. Calloway. Y'all have a good one. We hung up. Diane closed her laptop. That's it. Notices go out certified and by email today. The card's dead before lunch. The car, when do you want it? Tomorrow, I said. Give him a day to read the letters first. Let him understand this is real. Theo sat back. And where are you going to be when all this blows up? My apartment. The real one. I stood and my knees popped again, 63 years old. Some mornings I felt every one of them. I'm not hiding. If my son wants to find me, he knows where the office is. I just won't be making any of it easy. I stopped at the door. Thank you both. I know this is an ugly thing to ask. Theo stood too. Maggie, Wesley would have been proud of you. A beat. He always said real love draws a line. I just wish you'd listened to him a few years sooner. I felt it catch in my throat. Wesley, God, how I missed him in a moment like this. Yeah, I said quietly. Me too. Then I walked out into the cold Austin morning where the certified letters were already printing, and somewhere across town my son was about to wake up and find out that nothing he owned was ever his. I wasn't in the room for any of what I'm about to tell you, but I've heard it told enough times now, by Ethan, by Theo, by the people who were there, that I can see it the way you see a thing you've replayed 100 times. So let me tell it the way it happened to him. The Friday after Thanksgiving, my son woke up to silence. No call from me, no text. Brielle was still asleep. They'd been up till 2 arguing about the scene I'd made. Your mom's always been dramatic. She'll come crawling back by Sunday begging forgiveness, Brielle had said. But that morning there was nothing. Just a quiet in the apartment that put a knot in his stomach he couldn't explain. He opened his laptop at the kitchen island, scrolled past the Black Friday junk and the Slack pings, and then he saw a subject line that stopped his coffee halfway to his mouth. Notice of non-renewal lease agreement. Sender, Ironwood Capital Property Management. He read it 3 times because his brain refused to make the words mean anything. Will not be renewed. Vacate the property. January 31. The hell is this? He said out loud, to nobody. He found the number at the bottom and dialed. It rang 4 times. Ironwood Property Management, this is Tara. How can I help you? Yeah, hi. This is Ethan Calloway. I just got an email about my lease not renewing, and it's gotta be a mistake. I've never been late, never had a single. One moment, let me pull your file. Keys clicking. Every second felt like a year. Okay, Mr. Calloway, there's no mistake here. The ownership's elected not to renew. That's within their rights under Section 12 of your agreement. But why? Did I do something? There's got to be a reason. I don't have that information, sir. We just carry out the owner's decisions. Then who's the owner? I need to talk to whoever this is because this makes 0 sense. That information's confidential. If you'd like to appeal, you can submit a written request to our office on Congress Avenue. He frowned. He knew that building. It was 4 blocks from his own office. Okay, look, can I at least lease the place when it goes back on the market? Absolutely. When the unit's available, you're welcome to apply like any other applicant. Current market rate on that unit runs about $3,800 a month. He almost dropped the phone. $3,800. But you pay $1,400, Mr. Calloway. That's a preferential rate that won't be carrying over. The line went dead in his hand. $3,800. His take-home was $28 after taxes. The math wasn't hard. It was impossible. Babe? Brielle was in the bedroom doorway, wrapped in a silk robe. Why are you yelling? We're getting evicted, he said hollow. We have to be out by January 31st. She blinked like he'd switched to another language. No, this is your place. It's a rental, Brie. It's always been a rental. But you pay on time. You have tenant rights. They can't just... Yeah, he said. They can. She read the email over his shoulder, and her face went from confusion to disbelief to something hard and bright. This is about Thanksgiving. Your mother did this. Somehow she got to the owner and I don't know. He shoved both hands through his hair, but I'm going to find out. He grabbed his jacket and the SUV keys. By the time he hit the parking garage, his phone was already buzzing. Brielle at the mall. The black card declined twice at the register in front of a line of people. She called the bank from the food court, voice tight and bright the way it got when she was scared. It's an authorized card, ma'am, the rep told her. The primary holder canceled it yesterday. Primary's a Margaret Calloway. Brielle stood in the middle of the mall holding a dead piece of plastic surrounded by other people's shopping bags. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt the floor she thought she stood on wasn't there. The next morning, Saturday, two guys in reflective vests knocked on the door at 8:15. Morning. Ethan Calloway? We're with Ironwood Asset Recovery. Here to pick up the SUV. That's my car, Ethan said. The older one flipped a clipboard around. Per our records, the vehicle's owned by Ironwood Capital. You had temporary authorization to drive it. That's been revoked. Gonna need the keys and a signature on this return form. This is insane. They gave me that car 2 years ago. I use it for work, sir. The man was patient, like he'd done this 1,000 times. Your signature's right here on the original. Says temporary authorization, business representation. Vehicle was never in your name. And there it was. Ethan's own signature, 2 years old, on a document he'd never bothered to read. He stood in the garage with Brielle and watched the SUV roll out into the street and disappear. The parking spot just sat there empty. Your mother, Brielle said slowly, is burning us to the ground. It doesn't make sense, Ethan said. How does my mom have this kind of pull? She's a widow. She lives off a pension. She wears the same coat she's had for. He stopped. A thought was forming. Ugly. Impossible. The lease, the car, the card, all of it routed through one name, Ironwood Capital. He ran back inside for his laptop. He typed Ironwood Capital Austin into the search bar. Up came the basics. A private investment firm, founded 2003, CEO Theo Bennett, portfolio across real estate and early-stage tech. Then he pulled the cap table, the leaked one, the one a buddy at North Ledger had passed around in a private channel back when the round closed, the one that showed who really owned the company he worked for. And there at the top of North Ledger's lead investors sat a holding entity. He traced it. It rolled up into another, which rolled up into Ironwood, which rolled up into a single anonymous limited partner whose name was redacted on every public document. But the managing partner, the human being whose signature appeared on the formation docs over and over, was Theo Bennett. Something in Ethan went cold and certain and wrong. By noon, he was standing in the lobby of the building on Congress, the one 4 blocks from his office, the one he'd walked past 100 times. A small brass plate by the door read Ironwood Capital. He took the stairs 2 at a time. A receptionist looked up. Can I help? I need to see Theo Bennett. Now. Something flickered across her face when he said his name, but she picked up the phone. A minute later, a man came down the hall, late 40s, gray at the temples, an easy, expensive calm about him, hand already extended. Theo Bennett, you must be. Ethan didn't shake it. You son of a. His voice cracked on the edge of a shout. You did this. You took my house, my car. You've been pulling strings on my whole life. You're the silent owner, the LP, all of it. You've been playing me. My mom said one wrong thing at a dinner, and you decided to torch Ethan. Theo's voice was quiet, and that quiet stopped him more than yelling would have. Walk with me a second. He didn't move. He was breathing hard. Just tell me you're the one behind Ironwood. Tell me to my face. And Theo did something Ethan didn't expect. He looked almost sad. He didn't answer the accusation. He just turned and nodded at the wall behind the reception desk, where a row of framed photographs hung. Ethan followed his eyes, and he froze. In the center frame, a man in a hard hat stood grinning in front of a half-built apartment block, climbing gaffs still strapped to his boots. The plate beneath it read, Wesley Calloway, co-founder, 1963-2019. His father who'd been a lineman, his father who'd died of a heart attack in an office Ethan had assumed belonged to somebody else. Co-founder. Your dad wasn't an employee here, son, Theo said gently. He built this with his own 2 hands, him and one other person. Ethan's mouth had gone dry. Who's the other person? But he already knew. In the corner of that same photograph, a little out of focus, stood a woman in a plain dress, holding a clipboard, talking to 2 men in suits who were leaning in to listen to her. The set of her shoulders, the way her jaw was set when she was about to win an argument, his mother. I'm not the silent owner, Ethan, Theo said. I just signed the papers. Ironwood belongs to your mother. It always has. 85% of it. A pause. She owns the penthouse. She owns the car. North Ledger only exists because Ironwood kept it alive through 2 bad quarters. Another pause, and this one was the one that broke him. Everything you ever bragged about, every dollar of the life you told the world you built yourself, she paid for it, and she never said a word, not once, until you told her to find somewhere cheaper to live. Ethan didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. He turned and walked out into the cold, and he made it 2 blocks before he had to stop and put a hand against a building because his legs wouldn't hold him. He moved out 3 weeks early, couldn't stand to be in the place once he knew whose it was. The apartment he could actually afford was in Easton, not the East Austin of cold brew bars and muraled coffee shops, but the older stretch, 8 blocks fast past where the money had reached. 450 square feet on a 3rd floor with no elevator, water stains on the ceiling shaped like countries, a kitchen with appliances older than he was, $850 a month, plus utilities. It was, by a strange coincidence he wouldn't understand for months, 4 blocks from the very first duplex his father and I ever owned. He moved in on a gray December morning with 2 suitcases and a shame that sat on his chest like a cinder block. And here's the part I'm not proud of either, because for a few days there, my son nearly became exactly the man I'd raised him to be by accident. He spent his first nights on the floor doing math on his phone, take home 28, rent and utilities 920, food, transport, the rest. He had a few $100s of breathing room a month, in a life where Brielle used to spend that on a single handbag. And on the 4th night, scared and humiliated and unable to picture telling a single one of his friends what had happened, he opened one of those apps, the kind that'll wire you $3,000 in an hour at an interest rate they bury in the fine print. He filled in the whole application, amount, income, the works. His thumb was over the button, and he thought about his father's signature on that vehicle form, the document he'd never read, the line he'd signed without looking, the exact careless reflex that had cost him everything. Don't sign what you don't understand. He closed the app, set the phone face down on the bare floor, and for the first time since the table, he cried. Not the angry crying from the sidewalk, but the other kind, the kind that empties you out. Brielle was already gone by then, not to her parents in a huff, the way I'd half expected. She'd packed quietly over 2 days while he was out walking the city, and she left a letter on the kitchen counter, weighted down with the dead black credit card. He found it that night. He almost didn't read it. He told me later he figured he knew exactly what it'd say. Call me when you're a winner again. But he read it, and it wasn't that at all. Ethan, it started. I'm not leaving because the money's gone. I need you to believe that, even though I know you won't. You never asked me much about before I met you. I let you not ask. Here's the part I never told you. When I was 9, a man knocked on our door with a clipboard, the same as those guys who came for your car. We had 3 days to be out. My mom packed our whole life into trash bags, and we slept in her Corolla in a Walmart lot for 2 months. I brushed my teeth in gas station bathrooms before school so nobody would know. I swore I'd never feel that again. I built a whole self on top of that promise, the bags, the dinners, the posts, all of it. Armor. I thought if I looked rich enough, long enough, the floor would never open up under me again. And then on Thanksgiving, I watched your mother stand up in her apron, in the house she'd worked her whole life for, and walk out the door with her chin up, because you and I made her feel like she didn't belong at her own table. And I realized I'd turned into the man with the clipboard. I'd become the thing that terrified me. I can't be near that and not become it. I'm not strong enough, not yet. That's on me, not you. I hope you figure out who you are without all of it. I never got the chance to find out who I'd be. Maybe you will. Be. He sat on the floor of that empty apartment and read it 4 times, and it cracked something open in him. The easy story he'd been telling himself, the one where Brielle was the gold digger and he was the victim. It had never been that simple. It never is. A few days before Christmas, his grandmother called. Lorraine, my mother, was 84 and sharp as a paring knife, and she'd never once in her life let Ethan get away with a thing. She told him to come by. He went because he had nowhere else to be and nobody else who'd have him. She sat him down at her little kitchen table with a cup of coffee he didn't want and looked at him over her glasses. "So you finally found out," she said. "You knew. It wasn't a question, baby. I was there. I watched your mama and your daddy save every nickel for 9 years before they bought that first duplex. I watched them tear it down to the studs and put it back together with their own hands. I held you while they worked." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "Course I knew. Then why did nobody ever tell me? Because your mama wanted you strong on your own 2 feet. She didn't want you growing up like those trust fund kids who think the world owes them a soft landing." Lorraine's eyes were steady. "She didn't lie to you, Ethan. She just didn't tell you everything. There's a difference, and you're old enough to know it. They let me believe I was taking care of her," he said, "that I was the one holding things up. And that felt good, didn't it?" She said, not unkind. Felt good to be the big, successful son looking after his poor, widowed mama. He opened his mouth and nothing came out. "Your mother could have lived in a mansion, could have quit working 10 years ago and never lifted a finger again. She chose that little apartment and a 14-year-old truck instead. And you know why? So you wouldn't smell it on her. So you'd have a shot at building something that was actually yours." Lorraine reached across and took his hand with that papery, surprising strength of the very old. "Your daddy used to say the cruelest thing you can do a young man is hand him the finished house. Never lets him learn how to hold a hammer." Same thing they did. She squeezed. From scratch. No checkbook, no name, no shortcuts. Just you and what your 2 hands can do. That's the only road that ends with you able to look her in the eye again. He sat there a long time, holding his grandmother's hand, crying for everything he'd lost and everything he was only just starting to understand. What neither of them knew yet, what Ethan wouldn't find out for months, was that someone had already started clearing that road for him. Quietly. The way everything in our family always got done. The text came on a Tuesday in January from a number Ethan didn't recognize. "Hey Ethan, name's Walt Briscoe. I run a small electrical outfit here in Austin. Residential, some light commercial. Heard through the grapevine you're looking for work, and you're not too proud to start at the bottom. Your daddy and me go back a ways. You want to talk, come by the shop." He almost didn't answer. A month earlier, he'd have laughed at it. He ran product at a fintech. He had a degree. He wasn't about to go pull wire for $20 an hour. But a month earlier, he'd had a car and a card and a wife and a name he thought was his. So he texted back 2 words, "When can I come?" Walt Briscoe's shop was a metal building off a service road, the kind of place with a coffee maker that hadn't been cleaned since the Obama administration, and a German shepherd named Diesel who ran the front office. Walt was 49, built like a fire hydrant with forearms like braided rope and a handshake that made Ethan check his fingers were all still attached. "So," Walt said, looking him up and down, "Wesley Calloway's boy. You knew my dad? Knew him?" Walt snorted. "Apprenticed under him. Man could read a panel like other folks read the funny pages." He didn't just know how a building got wired. He knew why. Knew the bones of a place. He jerked his chin at a photo tacked to the wall, curling at the corners. A much younger Wesley with a crew of guys, all squinting into the sun. "He told me something once I never forgot." Said, "Walt, buildings ain't for showing off. They're for people to live in without the lights going out on them." Something tightened in Ethan's throat. "Here's the deal," Walt said. "I got a job. Old apartments out near Montopolis. Landlord finally got cited. Whole place needs to be brought up to code, so the families in there quit getting shocked off their own stove. Budget's tight, pays worse, works hard, and you'll spend the first month feeling dumber than you've ever felt in your life. 20 an hour. You in?" It was a third of what he'd made at North Ledger. "When do I start?" "Monday." Walt almost smiled. "Wear boots you don't mind ruining. You'll be on your knees in a crawl space, not behind a desk." That first month was exactly as humbling as Walt promised. Ethan didn't know which end of a fish tape to hold. He stripped wire wrong, wired an outlet backwards, and tripped a breaker on the whole floor, dropped a spool of 12 gauge off a ladder, and nearly took out a coworker. The other guys razzed him good-naturedly. "College boy, don't strip it like it owes you money." And he took it because every bit of it was earned. But he showed up. 5:30 every morning before the sun, riding the bus across town with a thermos and a sack lunch he'd learned to make himself. He came home filthy and aching, ate something simple. He'd figured out how to cook eggs, pasta, a decent pot of beans, and fell asleep before 9. His hands cracked and bled and then slowly calloused over. The soft palms of a guy who'd typed for a living went hard. Brielle's divorce papers came in February. He signed them at his little IKEA table without a fight. Part of him was sad. A bigger part was something like relief, for her too. She deserved someone who could give her the life she wanted, and he needed to find out who he was when nobody was watching and nothing was free. One Saturday, his neighbor across the hall knocked. Della, 60-something, who'd lived in the building since before the neighborhood had a name people paid extra for. She needed a light bulb changed in a fixture she couldn't reach. He changed it, then noticed her breaker box was a fire waiting to happen, and spent 2 hours fixing it for free. She fed him pot roast every Sunday after that. It tasted like something he couldn't name at first, and then he could. It tasted like his mother's cooking, like home. For the first time since the table, he felt the warmth of a place that was actually his. It was in March, up on a ladder in that Montepolis building, that the thing happened that changed everything, though it didn't feel like much at the time. He and Walt were running a new line, and Walt was telling a story to pass the time the way he did, half his mind on the wire. Your daddy, see, he never forgot where he came from. Year I damn near lost my truck and my license both. Long story, bad stretch, Wesley covered me. Didn't loan it, covered it, never let me pay it back. Said the only way to pay it was to do the same for some other dumb kid down the line. Walt fed a wire through the conduit, so when your mama called me back in December and said, he stopped, just for a second. But Ethan caught it. When my mom called you, Ethan said slowly, and said what, Walt's ears went red. He suddenly got very interested in the wire. Walt, a long breath. Ah, hell. He set the fish tape down. She called me, all right, right after Thanksgiving. Said her boy was about to hit bottom and she didn't want him to land somewhere that'd break him for good. Asked if I had room for an apprentice who didn't know a thing, but might be worth teaching. He finally looked at Ethan. That text you got in January? Wasn't the grapevine, son. It was your mother. She'd already paid the first month of your wages out of her own pocket before you ever walked in my door. Told me not to tell you. Told me to make you think you earned the spot cold. I about told her no. Felt like cheating. But she said, Walt's voice went rough. She said, Walt, I had to let him fall. I just couldn't let him hit the concrete. Ethan sat down right there on the rung of the ladder. All this time he'd thought he was alone, cut off, erased from the family that owned half of Austin. And the whole time, in the dark, just out of sight, his mother had been laying mass mattresses under him. The eviction was real. The repossession was real. The empty bank account was real. But she'd never once stopped catching him. She'd just made sure he couldn't see the hands doing it. Don't go soft on her now, Walt said, reading his face. She didn't do it so you'd quit and run back. She did it so you'd make it the rest of the way yourself. There's a difference. Ethan wiped his face with the back of a hand that didn't look like his old hands anymore. Yeah, he said, there is. By summer, Ethan had been on the tools 6 months. And somewhere in there, the two halves of his life had started talking to each other. He'd lie awake in that little apartment with a notebook, the old product guy brain firing in a new direction. He'd watched too many good tradesmen get stiffed, Walt's crew chasing invoices for 90 days, getting paid late, getting paid wrong, getting underbid by outfits that cut corners on safety and put families at risk. And he'd watched too many families in Montopolis and East Austin pay a fortune for basic electrical safety, or just go without and pray. So he built something. Not a building, a platform. An app, but the unglamorous kind. Fair scheduling and guaranteed on-time pay for licensed tradespeople, bundled with low-cost electrical safety inspections for low-income housing, subsidized by the contractor side. Tech meeting trades. The thing he'd have laughed at a year ago. Now the only thing that made him feel like both versions of himself were finally in the same room. He made the mock-ups on his cracked laptop at the kitchen table. Della brought him coffee and watched him work some nights. You remind me of somebody, she said once. Yeah? Who? Woman I used to see at the Union Hall years back when my late husband was organizing, always had a folder under her arm. Watched her stare down 3 men in suits over a contract one time, and not one of them got a word in. Della smiled. Had a jaw just like yours. Same way of frowning when she's thinking hard. Ethan's throat went tight. You think it was my mother? I couldn't tell you, baby. But whoever she was, she built things that lasted. Same as you're doing now. Walt looked at the plan for a week, then put it in front of him on the workbench. This is good, kid. This is real good. You got the trades part dead right, which most app boys never do because they never held a wire. He scratched his jaw. Thing is, you need money to build it. More than you got. More than I got. I don't have any contacts, Ethan said. The irony of it sat in the room between them. He had until very recently been related to half the early stage capital in the city. He couldn't use a dollar of it. Wouldn't. Well, Walt said, I might know a few people. Impact investors. Folks who put money in things that do some good and still pencil out. Let me make a call. A week later, they want to see you. August 15th, bring everything. The night before the pitch, Ethan stopped by my mother's place to borrow a tie. He didn't own one anymore. He'd sold the good ones months back. Lorraine dug one of Wesley's out of a cedar chest, navy with a faint stripe, and while she was at it, she let something slip. She didn't mean to. She was 84 and tired and worried, and she said your mama would come, to your big meeting, if she were up to it. Up to it? Ethan went still. What do you mean up to it? Is Mom okay? Lorraine's face did the thing a face does when it's already said too much. She's been tired is all, working too hard, Grandma, and it came out the way these things do, in a quiet kitchen with a borrowed tie in his hands. For months I'd been driving to a clinic on the north side 3 mornings a week before anyone was awake. A chronic thing, manageable, the doctor said, if I slowed down, which I had no intention of doing, not life or death. But the kind of diagnosis that puts a clock on a wall where there didn't used to be one, and makes a woman who's been patient her whole life suddenly not. That was the part Ethan hadn't understood until that moment. Why, now? Why the brutal speed of it? The 3 blows in 3 days, no stagger, no down. He'd thought it was anger. He'd thought maybe even cruelty. It was neither. It was a mother who'd looked at a calendar he'd never shown Simone and decided she did not have 10 more years to wait for her son to grow up. She had to teach him now, while she still could, and she had to make it stick. He drove back to his apartment with his father's tie on the passenger seat and didn't sleep at all. The address Walt gave him was on Congress Avenue. Ethan felt the cold go through him when the rideshare pulled up. He knew this building. He'd accused a man of ruining his life in this lobby 8 months ago. He called Walt from the sidewalk. There's a mistake. You gave me the wrong address. This is Ironwood. This is my. No mistake, Walt said quietly. Trust me. Go on up. So he walked back into the building where his whole life had come apart. In a $45 thrift store suit and his dead father's tie, carrying a beat-up laptop with a cracked corner and 50 pages of something he'd built with his own 2 hands. The receptionist, the same one, almost smiled. Mr. Calloway, they're expecting you. 4th floor boardroom. Who's they? Go on up, you'll see. The elevator opened on a floor he'd never been to. Glass walls. The whole city laid out behind them, all the way to the hills. At the end of the hall, a heavy door, a brass plate. Boardroom. He knocked. Come in. He opened the door and he froze. At the head of a long oak table in a charcoal suit, hands folded, hair perfect, sat me, his mother. To my right, Theo Bennett. To my left, Diane Caldwell. And down the table, 3 people he didn't know, laptops open, folders ready, the Ironwood Investment Committee. Ethan, I said. My voice was level, professional, the voice I use for strangers. Have a seat. He couldn't move. Mom, in this room, I'm Chair Calloway, I said, not unkindly, but firm enough to settle him. And you're the architect of a proposal that's come before this committee. You have 45 minutes. Begin when you're ready. I watched my son's face do the math that the woman who'd raised him was going to make him stand here and earn it in front of a room of people who didn't care that he was my blood. I watched him understand that there would be no soft landing in this room, and then I watched him do the bravest thing I'd ever seen him do. He set up his cracked laptop. He took a breath, and he started. My name's Ethan Calloway. I spent 5 years building software I thought mattered, and I never once held the thing my product served. Then I spent 8 months on my knees in a crawl space in Montopolis, rewiring apartments so families would stop getting shocked turning on their own stoves. He clicked to the first slide, a photo of a scorched outlet, a kid's drawing taped to the wall above it. This is what I want to fix. And I can tell you exactly how. Because I've been the guy on the ladder and the guy at the keyboard. And almost nobody in this country has been both. For 45 minutes, he laid it out, the platform, the numbers, tight, honest, no hockey stick fantasy. Fair pay for tradespeople, on time, guaranteed. Cheap safety inspections for housing that needed them most. A margin thin enough that it would never make anyone in that room rich, and real enough that it would last. Theo pushed him on the unit economics. Ethan didn't flinch. He knew every supplier, every cost, every callback rate because he'd lived them. Diane pushed him on liability. He'd already talked to 2 licensing boards. One of the committee members, a sharp woman I'd hired myself, asked the question I'd been waiting for. Why should we put money in something with a margin this thin? We have deals on this table returning 4 times what you're projecting. Ethan looked right at her. Because this isn't about the return. There are families in this city getting pushed out, getting hurt, getting robbed by guys who cut corners, and there are good tradesmen getting robbed right alongside them. This won't make you rich. It'll just let you sleep at night. A beat. My dad used to say buildings aren't for showing off. They're for people to live in without the lights going out on them. I'm asking you to fund the lights. The room was quiet. I closed my notebook. My hands were steady, but it took everything I had to keep my voice the way I needed it. Thank you, Ethan. One last question. Everyone at the table tensed. They could hear it wasn't a committee question. Why this? Why now? He looked at me. In 8 months, the table, the eviction, the empty parking spot, Brielle's letter, the crawl spaces, the calloused hands, the borrowed tie. 8 months passed between us in about 3 seconds. Because a year ago I had everything and I'd built none of it, he said, and his voice cracked, just slightly, the way Wesley's used to. And I had to lose all of it to find out that the people who need a safe place to live the most are the ones nobody's building for. I lived what they live. That's the whole company. That's why now. He paused. And because my father taught me the hands that build something matter more than the name that signs for it. I'd like to be worth the name for once. I made myself say it flat. Thank you. The committee will deliberate and you'll have an answer within 48 hours. That's all. He gathered his cracked laptop and his 50 pages. At the door with his hand on the knob, he stopped. Chair Calloway, a breath. Whatever you decide, thank you. For all of it. Even the parts that hurt, especially those. And he walked out before I could answer, which was a mercy, because I'm not sure I could have. When my son walked out of that boardroom, I sat at the head of the table and didn't trust myself to speak for a good 10 seconds. The committee waited. They're used to me being the first to talk. Opinions, I finally said. Theo went first the way he always does. The plan's solid. Numbers are honest, which is rarer than it ought to be. He did the work. You can hear it. He's been in it. But the margin's thin as paper. 1 bad quarter and we're underwater. Diane nodded. Legally, it's clean. Licensing's feasible, the liability structure holds. But Theo's right about the money. As a pure investment, it's marginal. The woman down the table, Renata, the sharpest hire I ever made, closed her laptop. As an investment, I'd pass. She paused. As a statement of what this firm is for, I'd write the check today. That's not a number question. That's a mirror question. I looked out the glass wall at the city Wesley and I had spent 40 years building into. The cranes, the half-finished towers. All that concrete poured 1 truck at a time by people whose names nobody photographs. Wesley, I thought. What would you do? I already knew. He'd have signed before the kid finished his first slide. Buildings aren't for showing off, Mags. They're for people to live in. He used to say it so often I'd roll my eyes. I'd have given anything right then to roll my eyes at him one more time. We fund it, I said, full raise, under conditions. Ethan runs it as project lead, reports to this committee monthly operational autonomy, hard financial oversight. No special treatment, no safety net I sign off on quietly. I let that sit. And if it works, if he proves it out, we offer him a permanent seat at this firm. Not as my son, as a builder who earned the floor. Diane was already drafting. Theo was almost smiling. And I went home to my small apartment, took the medication I'd been hiding from my son for the better part of a year, and slept better than I had since the night I walked out of his penthouse. The Bluebonnet Trade Initiative, that's what Ethan named it. His father would have groaned at how Texan it was and loved it anyway. Broke ground that fall on its first pilot. 40 units in a beaten-down complex out near where he'd been on his knees in a crawl space 8 months earlier. He was on site every morning by 7, hard hat, boots, plans rolled under his arm like a man I used to know. His crew was small, 2 young techs. An old foreman who'd worked with Wesley back in the day and called Ethan Cal's kid and worked him twice as hard for it. Walt consulted on the trade side and refused to take a dime over scale. It was not smooth. Nothing built by hand ever is. In the spring of 2026, a section of conduit got installed with cheaper wire than the spec called for, a subcontractor padding his margin, the oldest trick in a trade as old as fire. Ethan caught it on a Tuesday inspection. Could have buried it. 40 units behind schedule, every dollar accounted for. Nobody would have known for years. Instead, he tore the whole run out, ate the cost, fired the sub, and added 2 safety inspectors to the payroll out of the contingency line. $30-some thousand gone. Because he wouldn't put a family behind a wall he didn't trust. He brought it to the monthly committee meeting himself, before anyone could ask, stood up and reported his own mistake. I'd half expected him to soften it. I should have caught it sooner, he said. That one's on me. Here's what it cost, and here's what I changed, so it never happens again. The room was quiet. Renata wrote something down, and I said the way Wesley would have, mistakes happen. What matters is what you do in the next hour. You did right. 3 sentences. From me in that room, they were worth more than a bonus, and he knew it. The first finished unit got handed over in the early summer of 2026. The Reyes family, mother, father, 2 kids, and a grandmother, had been living 5 people in a single room across town, paying $700 a month for a place with an electrical panel that could have burned them alive in their sleep. When Ethan put the keys in Mrs. Reyes's hand, she cried in the empty, sunlit living room and kept saying she never thought they'd have something like this. Her youngest, Mateo, 12 years old, all elbows and front teeth, followed Ethan around the unit, asking what every wire did. You did all this? The kid asked. Me and a lot of other people, yeah. I'm going to be an electrician when I grow up. Like you, make houses safe for people like us. Ethan crouched down to his level. I've watched the video of this 100 times. Somebody on the crew caught it on a phone, and he said, you know what? You're exactly the kind of guy this whole thing's for. And he gave the kid one of his cards. When you're ready to learn for real, you call me. I'll teach you myself. That night he texted me a photo. Mateo standing in the doorway of his new home, grinning that gap-toothed grin. Underneath it, Ethan wrote, this is what Dad meant, isn't it? I looked at that picture for a long time before I texted back. Yes, this is exactly what your father meant. Well done, son. It was the first time I'd called him son since the table. We started having dinner once a week after that. His rule, not mine, no talking about work, just us making up for the time. He'd come to my little apartment on Sundays and we'd cook together, badly at first, then less badly. He told me about Della and her pot roast. I told him things about his father I'd been carrying alone for 7 years. We were slowly becoming people who knew each other. And then, on a Sunday in the fall of 2026, I decided it was time. I went to the cedar chest where I kept the things I couldn't throw away. Underneath Wesley's old climbing gaffs, the ones with his initials scratched into the leather, there was an envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed. My name on the front in his blocky electrician's handwriting, and under it 3 words, when the time comes. He'd given it to me the year we rewrote our wills, the year before he died. He pressed it into my hand at the kitchen table and made me promise not to open it unless I needed it. You'll know when, he said. You always know. I'd carried it for 7 years and never once broken the seal, because breaking it meant he was really gone, and I wasn't ready for that. I'm still not, if you want the truth. But I'd read my own copy of the will 100 times, and I knew what was in his heart, even if I'd never read the letter. So when Ethan came for dinner that Sunday, I set the envelope on the table between the bowls. I want you to read this, I said. But you need to know something first so you understand what you're holding. He looked at it, at his father's handwriting, at the date. Your dad and I rewrote our wills the year before he died, I said. I want you to understand it wasn't grief that made me do what I did last Thanksgiving. It wasn't anger. I wasn't making it up as I went. I took a breath I'd been holding for 2 years. There's a clause in your father's will, Ethan. A condition. The shares, your inheritance, your seat at Ironwood, they don't pass to you on my death. They pass to you when you've earned your own hands back. When you've supported yourself fully, with honest work for a full year, with nobody propping you up that you could see. I watched it land. Your father wrote that, not me. He was afraid, he said it to me a dozen times, that everything we built would be the thing that ruined you. That we'd hand you the finished house, and you'd never learn to hold a hammer. So he built you a door you could only open from the inside. Ethan's hands weren't steady, so the eviction, the car, Walt, all of it, was me keeping a promise to a dead man, I said quietly. I didn't take your life apart to punish you, baby. I took it apart because your father asked me to make sure you'd get it back the right way, while I stopped. He knew about the clinic by then. I didn't have to finish it. While there was still time for me to see you do it, he opened the envelope with the same care you'd use on something alive. I'd never read it. I let him be the first. He read it once to himself, and his shoulders started to shake, and then he read it out loud to me because he said I had a right to hear it too. I won't give you the whole thing. Some of it belonged just to the two of them, father and son, and some of it belonged just to me, and a man deserves to keep a few words private even after he's gone. But the part Ethan read me twice, the part that's been on the wall of his office ever since, was this: Son, if you're reading this, it means you went down hard and you climbed back up, and your mother kept her word, which I never doubted for a second. I didn't leave you money. I left you the only thing my own daddy left me: the knowledge that a man is worth exactly what he can build when nobody's helping him and nobody's watching. The rest is just paperwork. Go make something that keeps the lights on for somebody. That's the whole job. It's the only inheritance that ever mattered. I'm proud of you. I was always going to be proud of you. Dad, we sat in that little kitchen and cried like two people who'd both lost the same man and were only now finally grieving him together. 2 years to the week after my son told me to find somewhere cheaper to live, we had Thanksgiving again. Not in a penthouse. In my 800 square foot apartment with mismatched chairs we borrowed from 3 different people, and a turkey Ethan cooked himself, badly, gloriously, dry in one spot and perfect in another, the way a thing is when somebody you love made it with their own hands. The table was smaller than 2 years before. There was no fine china, no crystal, no open bar, no marketing crowd. There was Lorraine, 84 and holding court. There was Theo and his family. There was Diane, who turned out to laugh a lot more than her courtroom face lets on. There was Walt and Diesel the dog. There was Della, who brought the pot roast and cried when she saw how many people loved her boy. There was the Reyes family. I'd insisted Ethan invite them, and Mateo, who showed up with a drawing he'd made. A tall building, lights on in every window, and one word printed across the top in a 12-year-old's careful hand: home. And there was me at the head of a table for once, instead of at the counter, because my son walked me to the seat himself and pulled out the chair. Around 10 o'clock after the pie, Ethan stood up. His hands, those hard, scarred, working hands, were shaking a little. The room went quiet, but it was a different quiet than 2 years ago, a holding its breath kind of quiet. 2 years ago, at a table a lot fancier than this one, he said, I said the cruelest thing I've ever said to a person as a love. I told my mother to pay rent in a house she owned. In front of everybody, I made her feel like a guest in her own life. He looked at me and his eyes were bright, and she did the only thing a truly wise person could have done. She didn't yell, she didn't explain. She didn't pull out the deed and shame me in front of my friends, which she had every right to do. She just let me fall. His voice broke and he let it. And then she spent 2 years quietly, making sure the ground wasn't as far down as I thought. He pulled an envelope out of his jacket, set it in front of me. "It's a check," he said, "for every dollar I ever spent on that card. The dinners, the trips, the bags, all of it. $16,800. It took me 14 months to save it on an electrician's wage. A breath. It's yours. With interest. I should have paid it a long time ago." I looked at the check, then I picked it up and I tore it in half and I tore it again. "I don't want your money, Ethan," I said. "I never did. I wanted your character. And that baby." My own voice went then, finally, after 2 years of holding it together, "that you built yourself. That's worth more than anything in this firm." I stood up and I held my son and he held me back and the whole table just let us have it. Lorraine was crying. Della hollered, "That's what I'm talking about." Walt cleared his throat about 8 times and blamed it on allergies in November. Mateo whispered to his mother, "When I grow up, I want to be like Ethan." And Mrs. Reyes whispered back, "Then learn from his hands, mijo. But learn from his heart, too." After everyone left, Ethan stayed and helped me clean up. We washed dishes side by side, the way I used to with his father, easy in the quiet. "You okay, Mom?" he asked. "Really okay. The doctors." "I'm managing it," I said, and I was. The clock was still on the wall, it always would be now, but I'd stopped racing it the day I watched Myson report his own mistake to a room full of people who could have crucified him for it. "I've got more time than your grandmother thinks, and I intend to spend a good chunk of it making you cook a better turkey." He laughed. Then he got quiet and he said, "Can I ask you something? Are you happy?" I thought about it honestly because he deserved an honest answer. "I'm at peace," I said, "which is the better thing. Happy comes and goes. Peace stays. I dried a plate. Your father used to say the only legacy worth leaving isn't the buildings. It's the person you leave behind to keep building." I spent 40 years thinking he meant the firm. I looked at my son, the calloused hands, the tired eyes, the jaw he got from me and the heart he got from his father. He didn't mean the firm. He meant you. You're the only thing I ever built that I'd do over exactly the same. Outside the window, Austin glowed the way it does, a city full of lights that stay on because somebody, somewhere climbed a pole in the heat to keep them that way. And I thought, the silence I kept for 3 years, the silence that almost cost me my son, had finally said the thing it was always trying to say. I built an investment firm worth more money than my husband and I ever dreamed of, back in a 400 square foot apartment with a baby asleep in a laundry basket. But that boy in the laundry basket, grown into a man who tears out a wall rather than hide a danger behind it, he's the thing I built that I'm proudest of. The rest, like Wesley said, is just paper. I've read a lot of stories about parents and money, and this one stuck with me not for the reason you'd think. Maggie never punished her son. She just refused to keep lying to him. We tell ourselves that giving our kids everything is love, but sometimes it's fear wearing love's coat, and fear of watching them struggle, fear of not being needed. The hardest thing she ever did was let him fall, and then quietly make sure the ground wasn't as far down as he believed. If there's somebody in your life carrying you without ever asking for the credit, call them this week. Not next week, this one. And tell me down in the comments, could you have done what Maggie did? Honestly, I'm not sure I could have. Thanks for staying till the end. I'll see you in the next one.